The moment Amara Johnson said no, the room stopped breathing. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even angry. It was calm. Deadly calm. "No, Mr. Kang," she repeated, her voice smooth as polished stone. "I will not endorse that proposal." Across the 30-foot mahogany table, 12 Korean executives stared at her as if she had just set fire to the Seoul skyline. And at the head of the table sat Kang Ji-hoon, founder, chairman, and controlling force behind one of South Korea's most powerful infrastructure empires. He did not blink. He did not move. He simply watched her. The presentation screen behind her still glowed with the words, "West Africa Development Expansion Initiative." Everyone in that room understood what that project was worth. Billions. And Amara Johnson had just jeopardized it. The air inside the glass tower overlooking the Han River was too cold, too filtered, the kind of artificial chill designed to remind visitors that power lived here. Amara adjusted the cuff of her navy blazer and met the billionaire's gaze without flinching. "I believe," she continued in flawless Korean, "that the proposed land acquisition strategy exploits regulatory weaknesses in rural Lagos communities." A younger executive shifted uncomfortably. "It is legal," he insisted. "Legal," she said gently, "is not the same as ethical." Silence again. Ji-hoon leaned back slightly in his chair. He had expected many things from the Nigerian consultant flown in to advise on cultural and regulatory strategy, compliance, diplomacy, gratitude. He had not expected defiance, especially not in his own language. "How?" he asked quietly. "Would you structure it differently?" His voice was controlled, but there was something beneath it. Interest. Amara turned off the screen. "If your company wants long-term legitimacy in West Africa, you must partner with the communities. Revenue, sharing, transparent contracts, local hiring guarantees." "That reduces profit margins," someone muttered. "It increases longevity," she replied. Ji-hoon studied her as if recalculating something invisible. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't flirting. She was dismantling a billion-dollar strategy because she believed it was wrong. He had built his empire on precision and foresight. He recognized both in her instantly. "Everyone else," he said calmly, eyes never leaving Amara, "leave us." The room emptied in less than 30 seconds. The door clicked shut. The silence shifted. Now it wasn't corporate. It was personal. Amara folded her hands loosely in front of her. She knew what this moment could become: a reprimand, a dismissal, a subtle threat to her firm's reputation. She had seen powerful men close doors before. She had survived them. Ji-hoon stood slowly and walked toward the window overlooking Seoul. "You risked the contract," he said. "I protected it." He turned. "You assume I value ethics over expansion." She didn't hesitate. "I assume you value legacy." That landed. His expression changed, just slightly. Most people feared his temper. Few dared to challenge his long-term vision. None had done so without seeking advantage. "You are confident," he observed. "I am experienced." He studied her face properly for the first time. Not her resume, not her credentials. Her. She was not trying to appear younger than she was. There were fine lines around her eyes, silver threaded subtly through her curls, which she wore in a low, elegant twist. Her posture was erect, unbending. She looked like a woman who had survived storms and learned not to flinch at thunder. "How old are you, Ms. Johnson?" he asked bluntly. She didn't take offense. 55. He nodded once. "You speak like someone who has lost something." "I have," she said evenly, "and I do not intend to lose my integrity next." There it was again, that steadiness. He found it rare. Most people in rooms like this wanted proximity to power. She seemed immune. He surprised himself with his next words. "Have dinner with me tonight." It wasn't phrased as a question. It rarely needed to be. She didn't even blink. No. He actually paused. Excuse me. I do not mix negotiation with personal invitations, she replied. It complicates clarity. You assume this is personal. She held his gaze. It is. For the first time in years, Kang Ji-hoon felt something shift inside him. Not anger, not ego, recognition. She had seen the intention behind the invitation. Not romantic yet, but curious, intentional. And she had declined without trembling. You are not afraid, he said quietly. No, she replied. I am careful. And with that, she gathered her tablet and walked out of his office, leaving him standing alone. That evening, back in her hotel suite overlooking the city lights, Amara removed her heels and exhaled slowly. She knew what refusing him meant. Men like Kang Ji-hoon were not accustomed to rejection, but she had not rebuilt her life to become someone's calculated distraction. 14 years ago, cameras had flashed in her face outside a Lagos courthouse, while her husband held hands with a woman 26 years younger. The headlines had not been subtle. Engineer's wife blindsided by affair. She remembered the way strangers had looked at her afterward, pitying, judging, whispering that she had let herself go, as if betrayal were a cosmetic issue. That humiliation had nearly destroyed her. Instead, she had rebuilt. She founded her own infrastructure advisory firm. She raised her children without bitterness. She stopped needing male validation. And somewhere along the way, she buried romantic hope so deep she stopped looking for it. Love, she had decided, was a liability, especially with powerful men. Across the river, in a penthouse wrapped in glass and silence, Kang Ji-hoon sat alone with a glass of untouched whiskey. His assistant had already sent 3 alternative consultants to replace her if needed. He ignored them. Instead, he replayed the meeting. Her tone, her restraint, the way she didn't posture. After his wife died 8 years ago, he had built higher walls than his corporate headquarters. He had publicly vowed not to remarry, a strategic promise that kept his late wife's family from challenging his controlling shares. Emotion, he learned, was a vulnerability that cost leverage. He did not indulge it. So why was he thinking about a 55-year-old Nigerian consultant who had just refused him? It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was something sharper. She had spoken to him as if he were accountable, not untouchable. He realized something else. She had not asked for anything. No partnership extension, no private meeting, no access. She walked away clean. That unsettled him more than flirtation ever could. 2 days later, an economic summit hosted by the Seoul metropolitan government gathered international investors and political leaders. Cameras flashed relentlessly. Ji-hoon arrived first, as expected. When Amara entered the hall, she did not notice the subtle shift in atmosphere. But he did. He saw how she scanned the room, assessing, not admiring. During a panel discussion, a journalist asked about foreign development ethics. Ji-hoon surprised everyone. He gestured toward her in the audience. Ms. Amara Johnson has stronger insight on that matter than I do. Heads turned, cameras pivoted. She did not expect that, but she stood, spoke calmly, outlined a framework for ethical multinational development. The room applauded. Ji-hoon watched carefully. Not her beauty, her conviction. And in that moment, something dangerous formed. Respect. Deep respect. The photo was taken when they stood beside each other after the panel. Professional, appropriate, close enough to suggest familiarity. By midnight, a business blog had published it with the suggestive headline, "Is Korea's most powerful widower expanding more than his empire?" Ji-hoon's late wife's brother saw it before dawn, and he smiled, because scandal was leverage, and leverage was power. The next morning, Ji-hoon requested a follow-up strategy meeting. Amara entered the boardroom prepared. Before they could begin, he slid a tablet across the table. The article glowed on the screen. "I assume this is inconvenient for you," he said. She read it once, then placed the tablet down. "It is familiar." He watched her carefully. You have experienced this before. Yes. He expected anger. Instead, she looked tired. If this becomes a pattern, she said evenly, I will withdraw from the project. His jaw tightened slightly. You would abandon the contract because of speculation? I would protect my peace. That phrase stayed with him. Protect my peace. He had not heard anyone in his world prioritize peace over profit. And suddenly, he understood something clearly. If he wanted her trust, he would have to earn it. Not with charm, not with money, but with structural change. He leaned forward slightly. The acquisition plan will be rewritten. She studied him carefully. For business stability, for correctness. Their eyes locked. For the first time in years, Kang Ji-hoon felt the faint, unfamiliar beginning of something he had carefully avoided. Not desire, not yet. Something more dangerous. Interest with intention. And Amara, despite every wall she had built, felt it too, which is why she stood up. Do not do it for me, she said softly. Do it because you believe it. Then she walked out, again, leaving the most powerful man in Seoul staring after her and realizing he did believe it, and that realization would cost him more than he understood. The first contract Amara lost came on a Tuesday. It was subtle, a polite email from a Ghanaian municipal council citing unforeseen restructuring, no hostility, no accusation, just distance. By Thursday, 2 more projects were postponed indefinitely. By Friday, her Lagos office was quiet in a way she did not like. Amara stood at the window of her hotel suite in Seoul, staring at the river cutting silver through the city. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a client. It was her daughter. Mum, Zara said carefully, why is your face on Korean blogs? Amara closed her eyes briefly. Because powerful men attract cameras. Because cameras attract speculation. Because speculation attracts damage. It's nothing, she said gently. Business noise. But she knew better. Across Korea, financial media had shifted tone. The headline that morning was sharper. Chairman Kang's African consultant gains unusual influence in expansion talks. Influence. The word was deliberate. Poison disguised as curiosity. At Kang Global Holdings headquarters, the atmosphere was colder than usual. Ji-hoon did not sit at the head of the table this time. He let his brother-in-law, Park Min-seok, speak first. Min-seok folded his hands smoothly. The market reacts to uncertainty. Your public alignment with this consultant creates unnecessary speculation. She is advising on regulatory ethics, Ji-hoon replied evenly. She is photographed beside you at every summit. Ji-hoon's gaze sharpened. Because I invite competence to stand beside me. A faint smile curved Min-seok's lips. Is that what this is? The implication hung in the air. Board members shifted. Min-seok continued, voice deceptively calm. You made a promise after my sister died. No remarriage, stability, continuity, investors rely on predictability. Ji-hoon leaned back. I have not proposed marriage. But the market is nervous. And that was the point. The late wife's family owned 18% of the company, enough to destabilize leadership if the narrative turned personal. Min-seok slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed blog posts, social media threads, speculative commentary, and at the bottom, a more dangerous note. If Chairman Kang's judgment is compromised, leadership restructuring may be necessary. It was not a threat. It was a preview. In Lagos, whispers traveled faster than verified facts. Amara's former husband, Tunde Johnson, had given an interview to a local tabloid. She always wanted bigger rooms than I could afford, he said with wounded dignity. I'm not surprised she found one. It was cruel, it was calculated, and it reopened a scar she had stitched closed years ago. Her assistant, Ifeoma, called her late that night. Madam, should we issue a statement? No, Amara replied quietly. Silence is strength. But alone in her suite, she stared at the ceiling long after midnight. Not because of the gossip, but because it was working. 3 contracts gone, 2 pending. A reputation she had built brick by brick was being chipped away by implication alone. She had known this could happen, which meant she had to make a decision. The next morning, Ji-hoon requested a private meeting, not at headquarters, at a smaller office overlooking a construction site on the edge of the city. Concrete pillars rose from the earth like ribs of a giant skeleton. When Amara arrived, he was already wearing a hard hat, reviewing blueprints. She appreciated that. It was harder to lie around unfinished foundations. "You're losing contracts," he said without preamble. She did not feign ignorance. "Yes, my board is circulating internal concerns." "I assumed." He stepped closer. "This will escalate." She met his eyes. "Then I will withdraw." The words landed harder than he expected. "You would abandon the expansion?" "I would protect my firm." "And me?" Her voice softened, but only slightly. "You do not need protection." He studied her face. She wasn't retreating emotionally. She was calculating survival. "You think distance will stop this?" he asked. "It will slow it." "And if I don't want distance?" There it was. Not flirtation, not romance. Intent. Amara inhaled slowly. "This is not about want. It is about consequence." He took off his helmet, running a hand through his hair. "For 8 years," he said quietly, "I've operated under the assumption that emotional detachment guarantees stability. I built this company to withstand storms." "And now?" she asked. "And now I find myself questioning whether stability without conviction is weakness." The admission surprised even him. Amara's pulse shifted, not because of wealth, not because of power, but because he was speaking without armor. He walked toward the half-built structure and gestured for her to follow. Workers moved around them, unaware of the corporate tension simmering beneath the surface. "This project," he said, pointing at the skeletal framework, "was nearly canceled 5 years ago. Market volatility." "What changed?" "I believed in its long-term impact." She understood the metaphor immediately. He wasn't talking about concrete. "You are asking me," she said carefully, "to risk my foundation." "I am asking you," he corrected, "to trust that I will not let yours collapse." Trust, the most expensive currency she knew. "My ex-husband once told me," she said quietly, "that partnerships require sacrifice. What he meant was mine." Ji-hoon's expression darkened slightly. "I am not him." "No," she agreed. "You are more powerful." The truth of that settled heavily between them. Power could protect, power could destroy. "Give me time," he said. "For what?" "To restructure." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Restructure what?" "My vulnerability." The next headline was not subtle. Chairman Kang seen dining privately with foreign consultant amid board tensions. The photograph was from a restaurant terrace. The image was cropped to make them appear closer than they had been, but perception was louder than reality. Stock prices dipped by 2.3% before noon. Minseok called an emergency session. Investors wanted reassurance, and reassurance required sacrifice. Amara arrived at Kang Global's headquarters unannounced that afternoon. She walked straight into his office without waiting for formal clearance. He looked up. "I am ending this advisory role," she said calmly. His jaw tightened. "You do not end something that has not begun." "It has begun," she replied. "Publicly." He stood slowly. "I have already initiated share restructuring." She blinked. "What?" "I am reducing concentrated voting power held by my late wife's family." Her breath caught. "That will destabilize your board." "Yes." "You will lose leverage." "Yes." "Why?" He stepped closer. "Because control that depends on emotional isolation is not strength." The room felt smaller. "Do not do this for me," she whispered. "I am not." Silence. Then why? She demanded. His answer was simple. Because you were right. That evening, Min-seok confronted him directly. You would dismantle strategic safeguards for a woman? I would dismantle outdated ones for myself. You're being manipulated. Ji-hoon's eyes hardened. I built this empire from a shipping container office with 3 employees. I am not easily manipulated. Then you are distracted. No, Ji-hoon said quietly. I am awake. The board vote was scheduled within days. If he diluted their controlling shares, markets would react violently. If he did nothing, he retained power. But signaled that speculation controlled him. It was a calculated risk. For the first time in years, he was willing to take one. Amara packed her suitcase at dawn. Not dramatically, not angrily, decisively. She had seen enough storms to know when one was forming overhead. Her phone vibrated. A message from Ji-hoon. The vote is tomorrow. Stay. She stared at it, then typed back, I cannot be the reason you fracture your empire. 3 dots appeared immediately. You are not the reason. You are the catalyst. She closed her eyes. Catalysts accelerate change. They also get burned. Her car arrived downstairs. As she stepped into the elevator, her reflection stared back at her. 55 years, old, still capable of wanting something dangerous, and that terrified her more than any headline. The elevator doors slid open. She walked out into the Seoul morning, unaware that by the time her flight touched down in Lagos, Kang Ji-hoon would make a decision that would alter both their lives permanently, and once he did, there would be no returning to safety. The vote began at 9 a.m. At 9:07, Kang Ji-hoon detonated his own empire. He did not raise his voice. He did not slam his hand against the polished walnut table. He simply placed a revised governance document in front of every board member and said calmly, I am restructuring my voting control effective immediately. For 3 full seconds, no one spoke. Then Park Min-seok laughed. You're bluffing. Ji-hoon didn't blink. I have already transferred 8% of my personal shares into a public trust. Silence. Shock. Calculations happening. Behind controlled expressions. That 8% had been his insurance policy. The buffer that kept his late wife's family from ever challenging his authority. You would weaken yourself, Min-seok said slowly, over rumors? Ji-hoon folded his hands. I am strengthening the company. You are destabilizing investor confidence. Investor confidence, Ji-hoon replied, voice steady, should not rely on whether I dine with a consultant. Min-seok's eyes sharpened. This is about her. No, Ji-hoon said quietly. This is about me. When Amara stepped off the plane in Lagos, the air felt heavier than Seoul's sterile chill. Real heat, real noise, real life. She inhaled deeply. Her phone buzzed before she reached baggage claim. Vote concluded. Press conference at noon. Her chest tightened. She didn't respond. Instead, she switched off her data. If she was going to survive this, she would not watch it unfold live. She went straight from the airport to one of her project sites, a half-finished vocational training center on the outskirts of the city. Hard hat on, blazer off, sleeves rolled, control returned in familiar ways. She could not control media narratives, but she could control foundations. At noon, cameras crowded Kang Global's main auditorium. Financial reporters expected damage control. They expected reassurance. They expected him to deny personal involvement. Instead, Ji-hoon stepped to the podium alone. I will keep this brief, he began. The market ticker scrolled behind him. I have voluntarily diluted my controlling share structure. Effective immediately, the company will transition toward distributed governance. Gasps rippled through the room. This decision, he continued, is not reactive. It is corrective. Stability built on personal vows and emotional isolation is fragile. Min-seok watched from the second row, fury barely concealed. Ji-hoon's gaze did not waver. For years, I believed control equaled protection. I was wrong. Reporters began shouting questions. Chairman Kang, is this related to Ms. Amara Johnson? Are you planning to remarry? Has your judgment been compromised? He did not retreat. My judgment, he said evenly, has never been clearer. He stepped away from the podium without elaborating. Stock prices fell another 4.8% before market close. Within hours, the headlines multiplied. Chairman Kang weakens grip amid romance speculation power struggle. Inside Korea's largest infrastructure firm is love reshaping corporate Korea. Min Seok did not waste time. He convened emergency shareholders, framing Ji-hoon's decision as instability. Private investors grew nervous. Banking partners requested meetings. And in Lagos, Amara's phone finally came back to life. Messages flooded in from clients, from her children, from journalists, from him. She opened only one. It's done. 2 words, heavy, irreversible. She stared at the screen for a long time before responding. Why? The reply came almost instantly. Because I refuse to let gossip dictate my architecture. Her throat tightened. He had not denied it. He had not blamed her. He had not asked for gratitude. He had simply chosen, and that terrified her. Min Seok escalated. If Ji-hoon wanted structural war, he would have it. A financial investigation into West Africa expansion was leaked to regulators. Anonymous claims suggested irregular advisory payments to foreign consultants. The implication was clear. Amara was being positioned as a liability, not emotionally, financially. By evening, a Korean business channel was running a segment titled, "Did Ethical Consulting Mask Personal Influence?" Back in Lagos, Amara sat alone in her office as the segment streamed on her laptop. They did not accuse her directly. They insinuated, which was worse. Her assistant knocked softly. "Madam, some partners are asking for clarification." Of course they were. Reputation did not collapse dramatically. It eroded quietly. Amara closed the laptop. This was the war she had predicted, and it had arrived exactly as she feared. She dialed him. He answered on the first ring. "You should not have done that," she said without greeting. "I know. They are investigating my firm." "I expected that." Her breath caught. "You expected it?" "Yes." "And you still—" "Yes." Silence. In the background, she could hear faint office noise. He was still working, still calm. "They will try to sever us publicly," he continued, "to make this about impropriety instead of governance." "There is no us," she said sharply. A pause. "Isn't there?" Her pulse quickened. "You dismantled share control. You triggered a board revolt. For what?" "For clarity." "Clarity about what?" "That I will not hide behind strategic vows to avoid living." Her voice softened despite herself. "You are gambling billions." "I have lost more." She hesitated. "You lost your wife." "Yes." "And you built walls." "Yes." "And now?" "I'm tired of protecting myself from the possibility of being hurt." The honesty disarmed her. She closed her eyes. "I cannot survive another public humiliation," she whispered. "You will not," he said. "You cannot promise that." "No," he admitted. "But I can stand in front of it." Within days, Korean regulators requested documentation on all West Africa advisory contracts. It was procedural, but highly public. Min Seok ensured the media knew. In Lagos, Amar's ex-husband gave another interview. "She always knew how to position herself," he smirked to cameras. Her son called her that night. "Mum, are you okay?" "I am steady," she replied. But she wasn't. She was angry, not at Ji-hoon, at herself, for wanting something she knew could burn her. Back in Seoul, the board meeting was brutal. Min Seok laid out projections of declining stock confidence. "You have destabilized 8,000 employees," he accused. Ji-hoon listened without interruption. "You tied corporate control to personal abstinence," Min-seok continued. Now you break that promise. I tied control to grief, Ji-hoon corrected quietly. That was my mistake. You think investors care about your emotional growth? I think investors care about sustainable leadership. And you believe that includes a foreign consultant at your side? Ji-hoon's eyes hardened. It includes the right to make decisions without emotional blackmail. The room froze. The word had landed. Emotional blackmail. Min-seok's jaw tightened. The fracture was no longer subtle. It was open. That evening, Amara stood at the vocational center's rooftop as the sun dipped below the Lagos skyline. Her phone buzzed again. Another contract suspended. Another partnership reconsidering. She had worked too hard to build this firm. Too many nights. Too many silent recoveries. She would not let romance undo it. She dialed him again. I am issuing a public statement, she said firmly. What kind? One that separates my firm from your company entirely. Silence. Are you ending our advisory contract? He asked. Yes. And us? She swallowed. There is no us. The words tasted like ash. He did not argue, did not beg. After a long pause, he said quietly, If that is your decision, I will respect it. The restraint hurt more than resistance. I am not sacrificing my foundation again, she whispered. I know. And you? I already have. Her breath caught, but she forced herself to remain steady. Goodbye, Chairman Kang. She ended the call, before he could respond. The next morning, Amara released a formal statement. Johnson Infrastructure Advisory confirms the conclusion of all consulting agreements with Kang Global Holdings. We maintain the highest ethical standards and reject any suggestion of impropriety. Professional, controlled, distant, markets stabilized slightly. Commentators speculated the distraction was over. In Seoul, Ji-hoon read her statement without expression. He did not counter it. He did not deny it. He simply instructed his legal team to cooperate fully with regulators. And then, quietly, he booked a flight to Lagos. Stock valuation had dropped nearly 12% since his announcement. Min-seok moved to initiate a leadership review. Shareholders whispered. Financial analysts predicted instability. But Ji-hoon felt something unexpected beneath the chaos. Relief. For the first time in years, he was not maneuvering to preserve an image. He was acting from conviction. And conviction, even when costly, felt clean. 3 days after the public severance, Amara was inspecting a construction site under harsh midday sun when a black SUV pulled up at the edge of the compound. She assumed it was a supplier, until the door opened. And Kang Ji-hoon stepped out. No entourage, no press, no announcement, just him. In Lagos heat. In a simple charcoal suit already wilting under humidity. Her heart stuttered. He removed his sunglasses and walked toward her. Workers slowed, curious. She held her ground. What are you doing here? She asked, voice low. I came to see you. You should not have. I know. Her pulse pounded. You dismantled your board structure. Yes. You lost billions in valuation. Yes. You are under investigation. Yes. Why are you here? He stopped a few feet away, not touching, not crowding, just present. Because I have already paid the price, he said quietly, and I will not let you believe you were the cause. Her breath trembled. You cannot fix this by showing up. I am not here to fix it. Then why? His answer was steady. To ask you something. Her chest tightened. What? He held her gaze. If everything fell tomorrow, the company, the shares, the titles, would you still walk away from me? The question hit harder than any headline, because it wasn't about empire. It was about him stripped of it, and for the first time since this began, she saw it clearly. He was no longer protecting his power. He was risking himself, and that was far more dangerous. The Lagos sun beat down around them. Workers pretended not to stare, and Amara realized The next words she spoke would either rebuild the walls she had lived behind for 14 years or tear them down completely. 4. The architecture of choosing. If everything fell tomorrow, the company, the shares, the titles, would you still walk away from me? The Lagos sun did not soften the question. It pressed it deeper. Amara felt the weight of it settle in her chest, heavy and dangerous. This was not Seoul. There were no marble floors beneath her heels, no glass towers reflecting power. Only dust, steel beams, unfinished classrooms rising from red earth, projects she built with her own hands and reputation. If everything fell, she said carefully, you would not be the same man. His jaw tightened slightly. Correct. And I do not know that version of you. The honesty hung between them. Ji-hoon nodded once. Then get to know him. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't command. It was vulnerability wrapped in restraint. She looked at him properly, the sweat beginning to gather at his temple, the fine exhaustion around his eyes. He had flown halfway across the world without press, without strategy. That alone meant something. But meaning did not erase consequence. You think this is romantic, she said quietly. A billionaire flying to Lagos. I think this is necessary. For what? For truth. They moved away from the workers toward a shaded area beside stacked concrete blocks. He removed his jacket, folded it neatly over a crate, an absurdly precise gesture in the middle of chaos. My wife, he said, voice steady, married me when I was nothing. Amara did not interrupt. She believed in the early company when investors laughed. After she died, I promised her family I would not remarry. It secured voting alignment. It stabilized markets. You tied your grief to governance, she said softly. Yes. And you lived inside that promise. Yes. For 8 years? Yes. She inhaled slowly. Then why break it now? He met her eyes. Because I realized I was honoring the dead by refusing to live. The words were simple, not dramatic, not rehearsed, and that made them dangerous. Amara felt something crack inside her, not open, not healed, just crack. You could have found someone easier, she said. Younger, less complicated, Korean, quiet. I could have, he agreed. Why didn't you? Because none of them would have told me I was wrong. The answer startled her. He continued. You stood in my boardroom and chose integrity over access. You walked away twice. You ended the contract to protect your firm. You have never once tried to benefit from proximity. He stepped closer, but not enough to touch. You do not want my empire. You want your peace. Her throat tightened. Yes. And I want a life where peace is not purchased through isolation. The wind shifted slightly. Dust lifted. Silence deepened. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, he checked it. His expression did not change. But something hardened. What is it? She asked. Min-seok has filed for a formal leadership review. Her chest tightened. It means if shareholders side with him, I could be removed as chairman. She stared at him. You could lose everything. Yes. And you're standing here? Yes. She shook her head slightly. You are either very brave or very reckless. Possibly both. The faintest hint of something, almost humor, flickered in his eyes. It disarmed her more than any grand speech could have. She turned away from him, staring at the half-built classrooms. You want to know why I walked away? She asked quietly. Yes. She swallowed. Because the first time my life collapsed publicly, I did not see it coming. Her voice did not shake, but it lowered. I was 41. I had built a family, a business, a name, and overnight I became a cautionary tale. She turned back to him. Do you know what humiliation does to a woman over 40? He didn't answer. It erases her. People treat you like you failed at your only value, and when you rebuild quietly, carefully. You do not invite storms. I am not your ex-husband, he said firmly. No, she agreed. You are far more powerful, which means the fall would be louder. He absorbed that, did not deflect it. Then let me fall loudly, he said. Her heart stumbled. You say that now. I have already begun. The truth of that hit her again. He had already risked board control. He had already lost valuation. He was already under review. This wasn't potential damage. It was active. Without the empire, she asked slowly, who are you? He did not hesitate. A man who built something once and can build again. And if you fail, then I fail honestly. And what would you expect from me? He held her gaze. Presence, not rescue, not reputation management. Presence. The simplicity stunned her. No financial merging, no dramatic proposal, no demand, just presence. And suddenly she understood the real risk. He was no longer hiding behind wealth. He was offering himself stripped of leverage. That was infinitely more intimate. Her phone rang this time. It was Ifeoma. Madam, her assistant said urgently, regulators in Seoul have cleared the advisory payments. They released a statement. No irregularities. Amara closed her eyes briefly. The investigation had failed. Min Seok's attempt to stain her firm had collapsed. She looked back at Ji-hoon. They cleared it, she said softly. He nodded once. I expected they would. You were certain? Yes. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I did not want you staying for strategic relief. She stared at him. You wanted me to choose without safety. Yes. It was almost cruel in its clarity, but also honest. He did not want gratitude. He wanted decision. The Lagos sun began to lower slightly, shadows stretching long across the site. Workers resumed louder conversation, sensing the tension easing. Amara stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from him. You dismantled your control structure, she said quietly. Yes. You triggered a leadership challenge. Yes. You flew across continents without knowing my answer. Yes. Her pulse thundered. You do not get to rescue me. I am not trying to. You do not get to own me. I do not want to. You do not get to define my legacy. I wouldn't dare. Silence, then softer. And I will not be hidden. His voice was steady. You will not. That was the line, the one she needed. Not romance, not promises. Visibility. Deliberate, unapologetic visibility. She exhaled slowly. For 14 years, she said, I survived by never needing anyone. He nodded. I'm not asking you to need me. Then what are you asking? He held her eyes. To choose me. There it was. No empire, no strategy. Just a man asking a woman who had sworn off love to risk it again. Her heart beat painfully against her ribs. She stepped forward, not dramatically, not impulsively, intentionally. I will not give you blind trust, she said. I do not want blind. I will not abandon my firm. I would not ask you to. I will not shrink to protect your board. They will adjust. She searched his face for hesitation, found none. And if you lose the chairmanship, she pressed, then I gain clarity. She almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurdly him. Careful, strategic, and now willing to risk. She reached up slowly and adjusted the collar of his shirt, an unconscious gesture that startled them both. You're sweating, she murmured. This climate is aggressive. For the first time since this began, she smiled. Small, real, and something inside him shifted. because that smile felt harder won than any shareholder vote. 2 weeks later, Seoul held its breath again. The leadership review concluded in a split vote. Ji-hoon retained his position, but without absolute control. Power now required collaboration. Markets stabilized cautiously. And at the next International Infrastructure Summit in Singapore, Kang Ji-hoon did something deliberate. He walked into the conference hall beside Amara Johnson, not behind, not ahead, beside. Cameras flashed, whispers rose. He did not flinch. During his keynote address, he paused midway. "My company's future," he said calmly, "will be shaped by ethical global partnerships. Ms. Amara Johnson's advisory framework influenced that evolution. I am grateful." He did not label her, did not define her. He simply acknowledged her, publicly. Afterward, as reporters shouted questions about their relationship, he answered one clearly. "Yes, she's important to me." No elaboration, no apology, no defensive tone, just truth. Later that evening, on a quiet balcony overlooking the Singapore skyline, Amara stood beside him. "You realize," she said lightly, "this will not end speculation." "I know. It will create new battles." "Yes. You seem calm." "I am." She studied him. "Why?" "Because this time I am not protecting an image. I am protecting something real." Her chest warmed. "And what is that?" He looked at her. "Us." The word no longer felt dangerous. It felt earned. She reached for his hand, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. At 55, Amara Johnson did not fall recklessly. She chose deliberately. She chose a man who had already proven he would stand when it cost him. And Kang Ji-hoon, once the most controlled man in Seoul, learned something far more destabilizing than love. He learned that power without courage was hollow, and courage, when chosen publicly, rebuilt everything stronger. Below them, the city lights shimmered. Above them, no glass ceiling, no boardroom walls, just open sky. And for the first time in 14 years, Amara did not feel like she was bracing for collapse. She felt like she was building again, with someone beside her, not above, not ahead, beside.